She mocked the mechanic's rusty car in front of everyone, but when he started the engine, her laughter died. What happened next changed her heart forever. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support keeps these powerful stories alive. Let's get started. The California sun leaned low in the sky, pouring gold through the glass walls of Carter Lux Motors, one of Los Angeles' most prestigious car showrooms. Rows of freshly waxed sedans, roadsters, and hypercars gleamed under the white lights. Each vehicle reflected a different shade of perfection, flawless, futuristic, and untouched by real life. The scent of new leather and metal polish filled the air. Mechanics moved quietly in the background, wearing crisp uniforms. But at the far edge of the lot, under a patch of shade, sat something that didn't belong. A rusty old muscle car. Worn and proud, Jake Miller stood beside it. His sleeves rolled to the elbow, a rag tucked in his pocket. Engine grease still on his hands. The other workers treated him with a mix of respect and distance. He wasn't just another mechanic. He was the kind who fixed things others gave up on. His '69 Dodge Charger was proof of that. It wasn't shiny or new, but it roared with heart. Jake had rebuilt every inch himself after buying it as scrap 10 years ago. That car wasn't just transportation. It was his story, his freedom, his past and present, welded together in steel. The sound of heels echoed across the marble floor, sharp and rhythmic. Evelyn Carter, the 30-year-old owner of the dealership, entered the service bay with an effortless grace that drew every eye. She was the embodiment of her brand, tailored, composed, and expensive in every detail. Her black dress reflected the light, her hair perfectly styled, her confidence impossible to miss. She carried herself like a woman who had never heard the word no. Workers straightened as she passed, voices dropping to whispers. Jake just kept working, turning a wrench with quiet focus, pretending not to notice the stir she caused. Evelyn stopped, spotting the dull color of the Charger parked just beyond the pristine line of luxury cars. Her brows arched. "Who owns that?" she asked, pointing delicately with her manicured hand. The service manager hesitated, then smiled nervously. "That's Jake's project, ma'am. He drives it every day." Evelyn tilted her head, curiosity mixing with disbelief. She walked closer, her heels clicking against the concrete. The car looked ancient next to her gleaming fleet. Rusted fenders, faded paint, scars of time. "You actually drive that thing?" she said finally, half amused, half disgusted. Jake straightened, meeting her gaze with calm brown eyes that carried no trace of embarrassment. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "Every part of it's mine." The words were simple, but they carried a weight that didn't quite fit inside the laughter that followed. A few nearby employees chuckled under their breath, sensing their boss's tone. Evelyn gave a small, amused smile. "Well," she said, stepping closer to the car's hood, "it's certainly unique. But this is a luxury showroom, Jake, not a junkyard." Her voice was soft, but it carried the subtle authority of someone used to being obeyed. He didn't argue. He never did. He simply wiped his hands on the rag, then leaned against the car's fender, his eyes calm but unreadable. "Understood, ma'am," he said. "But it still gets me here on time. Can't say that about most of the new ones." The comment made a few mechanics snicker quietly. Evelyn's lips twitched. She wasn't used to sarcasm from her staff. But there was something in Jake's tone, not disrespect, not defiance, just honesty, that made her hesitate. She studied him for a second longer, noting the lines on his face, the steadiness in his stance. Jake had worked for her company for 5 years. His file said he was reliable, rarely took time off, and always finished a job no one else could. She'd never paid him much attention before, until now. There was something strangely authentic about him, something that didn't match the polished world she lived in. He belonged to another era, one where effort meant more than image. Still, she pushed that thought aside, straightening her posture. "Just make sure that thing doesn't sit near the front entrance," she said lightly. "It ruins the aesthetic." She turned and walked off, her laughter trailing behind her. When she disappeared into her glass office, Jake exhaled softly. He wasn't angry. He'd heard worse. People judged old things, old cars, old tools, old dreams, because they'd forgotten how long it took to build something that lasts. He looked at his Charger, the fading blue paint catching the sun, and smiled faintly. That car had survived more storms than anyone in that showroom. It had carried him through nights when his pockets were empty, and mornings when he still had to show up for work anyway. Every dent had a story, every sound a memory. Inside the showroom, Evelyn watched from her office window, pretending not to. Something about that man, his patience, his silence, unsettled her in a way she didn't expect. She had grown up around wealth, speed, and technology. Her father had built Carter Lux Motors from nothing, and after his death, she had turned it into a national brand. Everything in her world was calculated: numbers, image, success. Yet when she looked at Jake's old car rumbling quietly outside, she felt something oddly genuine, something her luxury models couldn't sell. The rest of the afternoon passed slowly. Clients came and went, admiring the latest electric prototype that gleamed under blue lighting. Evelyn posed for a photo with a celebrity buyer, her practiced smile flawless. But every time she heard a tool drop from the service bay, her eyes flicked toward the back, toward the man she had teased earlier. There was something magnetic about watching someone who worked not for money, but for pride. She couldn't explain it. She just felt it. By closing time, most of the staff had left. The California sky outside had turned amber and purple, the air warm and heavy with evening dust. Jake finished tightening a final bolt under the hood of a client's car, wiped his brow, and finally approached his Charger. He opened the door, the hinges groaning slightly, and sat down. He turned the key, and the engine coughed once, then settled into a low, thunderous growl. The sound rolled across the empty lot, powerful yet steady. The vibrations made the glass panels of the showroom tremble faintly. Inside her office, Evelyn paused mid-email, hearing that deep, mechanical rhythm. It wasn't like the electric hum of her showroom cars. It was alive, rough, human, real. She walked to the window again, drawn by something she couldn't name. Out there, under the fading light, Jake leaned on the wheel, one arm resting casually on the open window frame, eyes half closed, as if listening to the heartbeat of an old friend. The car's headlights flickered against the pavement. Evelyn found herself smiling, but this time without mockery. When Jake drove off, the Charger's taillights painted two streaks of red across the darkening street. Evelyn stayed by the window long after he disappeared, feeling the silence settle around her. For the first time in a long while, she realized how little she knew about the people who kept her empire running, and how easily she had laughed at something she didn't understand. Somewhere deep inside, she promised herself she'd take another look tomorrow. Maybe, just maybe, there was more to that mechanic than oil stains and rust. The laughter faded slowly, replaced by the steady hum of machines and the faint sound of wrenches clinking against steel. Jake didn't react. He had learned long ago that silence was stronger than any defense. Instead, he turned his focus back to the vehicle before him, a brand new luxury coupe, gleaming on the surface, but suffering from a mysterious engine failure that had left even the senior technicians scratching their heads. The air smelled of fuel and hot metal. He exhaled deeply, hands steady, eyes scanning the engine bay like a surgeon searching for a heartbeat. One by one, he dismantled the components, his fingers moving with practiced precision, born from years of experience. Every click of his ratchet echoed in rhythm, the sound almost meditative. Behind him, two young mechanics whispered, amused. "Think he can fix it?" One asked. "He probably guesses," the other muttered, smirking. Jake ignored them. He had no need to prove himself to words. His proof would come in the form of a perfectly tuned engine, something no laughter could erase. Slowly, methodically, he found the fault. A hairline crack in the fuel injector assembly. It was the kind of problem machines couldn't detect and most people overlooked. Jake smiled faintly, appreciating the challenge. He replaced the part, cleaned the connectors, and adjusted the timing belt by feel alone. His movements were confident, each action deliberate and fluid. He wasn't guessing. He was listening to the soft tick of cooling metal, the faint hiss of pressure release, the whispers of an engine telling him its secrets. Outside, the world passed, but inside that bay, time moved at the pace of craftsmanship. From her office upstairs, Evelyn watched through the glass window, her arms folded, pretending she wasn't watching at all. Her expression had softened since their earlier encounter. She told herself it was professional curiosity. She wanted to see if the mechanic could actually fix her best model. But deep down, there was something more. Something about the way he moved, unhurried, deliberate, almost artistic, made her forget the price tags on her showroom floor. He wasn't just repairing a car. He was resurrecting something mechanical into something alive. An hour passed, then two. The sun began to dip lower outside, casting long golden streaks across the garage floor. Sweat gathered on Jake's forehead, but he didn't stop. His concentration never wavered, even when the younger staff started packing up. At last, he closed the hood, twisted the key, and stepped back. The engine came alive with a deep, steady purr, smooth and powerful. The sound filled the bay, commanding silence. Heads turned. The same workers who had laughed earlier now stood motionless, awe-replacing mockery. Jake just smiled faintly and wiped his hands clean. "Good work, Miller," one of the supervisors murmured, breaking the quiet. Evelyn stood behind the glass, still watching. Her lips parted slightly, though she said nothing. For the first time in years, she found herself impressed. The problem had been declared unsolvable by her head engineer. Yet this man, with nothing but intuition and patience, had solved it before dinner. She felt an unfamiliar pull, not just admiration for skill, but curiosity about the man behind it. What kind of person still cared that deeply in a world built on shortcuts? Jake packed his tools carefully, wiped his station, and glanced at the time. His daughter would be waiting. She always waited for him outside, sitting with her backpack beside his car, tracing pictures in her sketchbook. He walked out of the bay, his boots leaving faint oil prints on the concrete. Outside, the California evening was warm, the light golden and forgiving. He saw her, little Lila, bright-eyed, waving from the hood of his Charger. "Daddy, did you fix the shiny one?" she asked, excitement bubbling in her small voice. He grinned. "Sure did, Pumpkin. Runs like a dream." She giggled, her legs swinging as she looked at his old muscle car. "Can ours run faster than theirs?" she asked. Jake laughed softly, brushing her hair. "Maybe not faster, but stronger," he said. "This one's got heart." He lifted her off the hood and opened the door for her to climb in. Evelyn, who had come outside unnoticed, stopped a few feet away. The scene caught her off guard, the image of the rugged mechanic and his little girl, framed against the fading light. Something in her chest tightened, though she couldn't quite explain why. Jake started the Charger. The key turned, and for a brief moment there was silence. Then a deep, thunderous growl filled the air. It wasn't just an engine starting. It was a declaration of life. The sound rolled across the lot, powerful, smooth, echoing off the glass panels of the luxury showroom. Heads turned from inside as customers and employees peered out. Even Evelyn felt the vibration through her heels. The muscle car's engine had a soul, a raw authenticity that none of her pristine machines possessed. It wasn't polished. It was alive. Evelyn's lips parted in astonishment. The noise wasn't noise at all. It was rhythm, controlled power. The Charger's rebuilt V8 roared with confidence, steady and untamed, like it knew it didn't belong, but didn't care. Jake revved it once, just to test, and the deep rumble made a few luxury models' alarms chirp faintly inside the showroom. Workers exchanged glances. "Holy hell," one whispered. "That thing sounds like it could eat ours for breakfast." Jake chuckled under his breath and patted the steering wheel as Lila laughed beside him. "Told you," he said softly. "Heart beats power every time." Evelyn stood frozen, unable to look away. In that instant, something shifted inside her. The world she knew, smooth surfaces, quiet engines, sterile perfection, suddenly felt empty compared to the raw presence of that sound. She had laughed at him hours ago, dismissing his old car as junk. Now she couldn't help but feel small in front of it. Jake wasn't trying to prove her wrong. He was just being himself. But somehow that made it even more powerful. His silence spoke louder than her status ever could. When the roar faded, the lot fell silent again. The golden light bathed the car as it idled softly, purring like a satisfied lion. Evelyn took a step forward, still stunned. Jake glanced her way, their eyes meeting for the first time that evening. There was no smugness in his look, no arrogance, just calm acknowledgement, a quiet, "I told you so," without words. She nodded once, almost unconsciously, as if admitting something she didn't want to say aloud. Her laughter from earlier echoed in her mind now, sounding hollow. Jake shifted the car into gear. "Hang tight, Lila," he said, smiling. The car rolled forward, its tires crunching softly against the gravel. The low hum of the engine lingered, even after it turned the corner and disappeared into the dusky street. Evelyn remained still, the faint vibration still humming through the air. Behind her, one of her assistants spoke softly. "Ma'am, should I lock up the floor models?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze remained on the road. For the first time, she wasn't thinking about sales targets or magazine covers. She was thinking about that sound. Inside her chest, something stirred. It wasn't romantic, not yet, but it was real. A flicker of admiration, maybe even envy. Jake's world was different. He didn't chase perfection. He built meaning. His car wasn't valuable because of price. It was valuable because of effort. And somehow, she realized, that was the one thing her showroom lacked: authenticity. She sighed softly, straightened her blazer, and turned back toward the building, the echo of that engine still pulsing faintly in her ears. She knew she would dream of it tonight. The golden hour spilled over the lot, the air warm and sweet with the smell of gasoline and evening dust. Jake stepped out from his car, the soft hum of the charger still echoing through the concrete like a fading heartbeat. He wiped his hands on an old cloth, smearing a streak of grease across his forearm. "Sometimes," he said quietly, not looking up, "beauty's not in what's new, it's in what still runs strong." His words hung in the air longer than he intended, landing softly in the space between them. Evelyn's expression changed, curiosity melting into something deeper. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The polished cars around them gleamed like trophies, perfect, flawless, and somehow lifeless. The Charger, in contrast, breathed warmth into the air, its paint dull but honest, its imperfections telling stories. Evelyn took a slow step forward, her heels clicking softly against the concrete. She studied the car's lines, the restored engine still ticking gently as it cooled. "You built this?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jake nodded, his tired blue eyes catching the sunlight. "Every bolt, every dent. She was scrap when I found her." There was pride in his tone, but also humility, the kind that comes from long nights, scraped knuckles, and believing in something no one else could see. Evelyn's gaze lingered on his hands, rough, scarred, strong, and she felt a strange ache in her chest. The man she'd mocked that morning now stood in front of her as something she couldn't categorize. He wasn't flashy or rich or dressed in prestige, but there was a quiet power in him, a kind she'd forgotten existed in her world of glass and chrome. She took another step closer, her reflection rippling faintly across the Charger's hood. The paint wasn't perfect, but it had depth, like it had lived a life. "It sounds—" she began, hesitating. "It sounds alive." Jake smiled faintly, resting one hand on the hood. "That's the point," he said. "Machines aren't just metal. You give them time, care, they give something back." Evelyn looked up at him, meeting his gaze, and for the first time since morning, there was no wall between them. Just two people standing in the same air, seeing the same truth. The sky deepened to amber. The lot had emptied. The employees gone, the showroom dark behind them. The silence carried an intimacy neither expected. Evelyn folded her arms, though it wasn't to shield herself. It was to hold something fragile inside. "Jake," she said finally, her voice softer now, "I'd like to take a ride." Jake raised an eyebrow, surprised but amused. "In this?" he asked, tapping the Charger's door. She smiled, a small, genuine curve of her lips. "Yes, in this." Her tone carried no teasing this time, just sincerity. Jake chuckled quietly, opening the passenger door. "Be my guest." She slipped inside carefully, brushing a speck of dust from her skirt before realizing how silly that was. The interior smelled of oil, leather, and something old, something real. When Jake settled into the driver's seat, the Charger felt smaller, enclosed in a world of heartbeats and unspoken thoughts. He turned the key and the engine came alive again, purring low and deep. The vibrations ran through the floor, through their bones, through everything between them. Evelyn exhaled slowly, an unexpected shiver tracing her spine. They drove out of the lot, the fading light painting long shadows over the road. The city shimmered in the distance, but Jake turned away from it, following a quieter route, where trees leaned over the road and the air smelled of grass and summer. The wind tangled through Evelyn's hair, lifting strands that glowed gold in the sun. She rolled down the window fully, her laughter soft this time, free, not forced. "It's different," she said, eyes on the horizon. Jake smiled. "No autopilot, no sensors, just you, the road, and the sound of the engine." For a long time they didn't speak. The rhythm of the tires and the hum of the motor filled the silence, each note falling into sync with their breaths. Evelyn reached out once, tracing her fingers lightly along the cracked dashboard. "You ever think of selling it?" she asked, knowing the answer even before he replied. Jake shook his head. "You can't sell a story," he said simply. "You can only drive it." The line made her smile. For a man who said little, his words somehow stayed. She turned to look at him, the angle of his jaw, the quiet steadiness in his eyes. As they reached a quiet overlook above the city, Jake parked the car, cutting the engine. The sudden silence felt sacred. Below them, Los Angeles glittered like a field of stars, alive but distant. Evelyn stepped out, resting her hands on the hood still warm from the drive. The air was softer up here, touched by the sea breeze. "You know," she said slowly, "I've spent years trying to make everything perfect. The showroom, the brand, my image." She paused, glancing at him. "But maybe perfect isn't the same as beautiful." Jake's smile was faint but knowing. "It never is." She turned toward him fully now, the last light reflecting in her eyes. "You changed the way I see things today," she admitted. "And not just cars." Her voice trembled slightly at the end. Jake looked at her, uncertain whether to speak. For a moment he didn't need to. The quiet between them said everything. Gratitude, admiration, something unnamed but unmistakable. Evelyn stepped closer, her perfume faint but sweet against the smell of oil and night air. "You build engines," she whispered. "But you also build faith." Jake's throat tightened. He wasn't used to praise, not from people like her. "I just fix what's broken," he said gently. Evelyn smiled. Maybe that's what the world needs more of. For a second, she hesitated. Then softly she placed her hand over his, resting against the hood. His skin was warm, calloused, real. The city lights reflected faintly on the Charger's chrome, dancing like fireflies. It wasn't the luxury she'd built her life on, but it was something infinitely richer, a sense of belonging, of being seen not for what she owned, but for what she could feel. They stood there as the last light faded, and a quiet understanding grew between them, something fragile, tender, but rooted in truth. Evelyn looked at the car once more. "You know," she said, half smiling, "I thought my cars defined me. But this one taught me something." Jake tilted his head. "What's that?" She looked up at him, eyes soft. "That sometimes it's not the car that's old. It's the people who forget how to love what they already have." The words hit deeper than she expected. Jake didn't answer, but the way he looked at her said everything. The stars began to appear, scattered across the violet sky. Lila's laughter echoed faintly in Jake's mind, her voice reminding him that the world still had simple joys. Evelyn leaned against the car, her voice quieter now. "Maybe I'll stop by the shop sometime," she said. "Not for business." Jake smiled, looking out toward the lights below. "You're welcome anytime." Their eyes met again, and this time there was no misunderstanding, no divide of class, pride, or steel. Just connection. The kind that didn't need words. When Jake finally started the Charger again, the engine's deep growl blended with the night, rolling softly through the hills. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the rhythm beneath her, not the hum of luxury, but the heartbeat of something genuine. The road stretched ahead, endless and open, the headlights cutting through the dark like a promise. She smiled to herself, realizing that for the first time in years, she wasn't chasing perfection. She was just moving forward, with him, with something real, with something that ran strong. And as the Charger roared gently into the California night, its reflection gliding across the glassy world below, two lives, once divided by chrome and class, found the same road side by side. The laughter that began in mockery had turned into something beautiful, respect, affection, and maybe the first quiet breath of love. The old car kept running, steady and proud, carrying them both, proof that beauty wasn't in what's new, but in what still runs strong.